Hello, everyone. Today is October 14th, 2021. I'm here with Mat Qadri. Matt is a corporate strategist. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Matt.
Thank you for having me, Karosh.
So, as we were speaking about, right before we started, you started a Instagram page that, you know, creates content to educate young professionals on how to obtain and maintain finances. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I uh, I have in my life, I've observed that people have their own interpretation of what it means to be wealthy and how to go about getting money and keeping it. And and this is kind of my personal message on what I believe is the quote unquote right way to not only make money when you're young, but to keep it generationally across generations.
So you said the right way. What is the right way in your view to make money and maintain it?
In my head, I think it boils up to a few different principles. I think the easiest one is don't spend don't spend more than you make, right? And then there's invest what you have left over in some asset that generates some sort of return in the future. And then there's set aside something for structure everything so that you're planning for your own future and perhaps like your kids' future, right?
Yes. And how did you come about that interest? I don't, being independent and having good finances is nice, but a lot of people aren't thinking about it right now.
Yeah, it's really I just what I observe is that we have this a couple of different things, right? So people we have certain technologies that give us like forums for people to go and share their life, right? And you have the way people want to communicate that life, right? They want to be flashy and whatever with their designer clothing, even though they might not be able to afford it. And and then you have the people who are actually wealthy, right? So when I grew up in my life, single mother household, I believe she never made more than I would say like 30 grand a year in all of my childhood on her own, supporting me and a little sister. And so when I went to college and I managed to finish and I knew what it was like to not have money, I was the question I posed for myself was how do I like basically because money was the center of my life at a certain point where I needed it and I didn't have it. I that's where the interest kind of comes from. And so I went on to pursue more education and in finance specifically when it comes to things like the stock market and legit assets, right, that grow. That's really when there was some kind of like switch flip and I was like, wow, I'm surprised that more people aren't talking about it or better yet, more people aren't actually doing anything about it. Like it just seems so urgent.
It is urgent. And, like you said, you came from a household where, money is when you, money isn't coming in to the requirements that most people that you have, then it's very obvious and it's pretty much the biggest need. I think, Kanye West has this lyric, money ain't everything, but not having it is. In which
Yeah.
case, so, if you're of a certain level of wealth, then you don't think about money so much. But when you're below that level of wealth, then it's like there's there's some huge problems there. I I've actually heard one of my friends said that, she was in college and she was some type of, I think, psychology student, and she said there was a study done where up to, 60K, it's, whatever and the study rated happiness. So it was saying that once a person reaches 60K, anything above that, the happiness level doesn't increase or decrease, but below that, it's directly associated.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because it goes into, when people have the debate on whether or not money brings happiness, and it's like everybody has their opinion, but here's an example of where there is some floor, right? Some like minimum that you kind of need to be at in order to stop focusing on it so much. And that's exactly like the theme that I keep circling back to in my personal childhood in my life. And I'm fortunate enough to have been able to use my education to learn how to get a job and get a job, and now I'm paying back. I carry my own debt burden that I'm paying off with my student loans, right? These are all really common problems that I think a lot of kids have, where they go to college, they come out, they're underemployed, they don't do anything with their degree. They have, I think the average debt for a bachelor's is like 25 grand-ish or 30 grand. And then, if you look at like an income by age, like the median income by age, I think for like a 23 or 24-year-old, it's still like 30 grand, right? Like they're barely making any money. Um, and there's so much, I find that there's so much opportunity out there too, which is really weird, right? Like I see
Yes.
you have like this new economy with social media and all the other tech enabled trends, but even in like traditional companies, I find that there's a lot of openings if you got the right degree. And so
Yes.
seeing that kind of blows my mind.
And even if you don't have the right degree, I know people who haven't gone to have never, maybe went a few years to community college, and they have they have jobs as in techno in IT. So it blows my mind too. That level of underemployment, I know a lot of people don't want these jobs, like I'm an engineer, and people, when I tell them that, I'm a software engineer, they're like, "Oh, wow. You must, like kind of hate it." I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I don't love it. It's not like my ultimate passion where, I think about it when I leave work and I think about it on the weekends, but I need money. I need to make some money. I need to live, and it's a good job. And yeah, I don't love being in the office, but I don't want to be underemployed. You know, I don't want to struggle.
And this is a great point because I think it actually touches on something else that I think is happening, where because we see a lot of people, there's a lot of survivorship bias. Like you see a lot of people who are doing something different and making a lot of money, or look like online that they make a lot of money, and it's like the people our age, let's say. I don't know how old are you?
28. You?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm 24.
Nice.
Um, and so I forgot where I was going. The Oh yeah, so we see people online who are doing something totally different. They're making a lot of money, or it looks like it. The people who are where we are, and they might say, well, why would I go do that job, that traditional, corporate soul sucking job, when I can go and try and do this? And the truth is like, yeah, maybe you could do it, but how about you get yourself kind of established first before you go and take a risk? Because I find a lot of people do that too.
I agree. Even just a small foundation of like a backup, some assets, some sort of ability, not just going from debt to risk. It, I mean, it can work, but you can also set yourself up for massive debt payments years down the line, which I have friends who, it's like couple few thousand a month in debt payments, which is crazy.
Dude, it's like paying a mortgage, right? Like it's crazy to think that there's a lot of people out, and the other thing is that a lot of the people who are paying that kind of money can't even like get the job that was supposed to give them that high income. to then make those to afford, let's say, those thousands in debt, right? So it's kind of scary to think about. Like even in I was reading this other thing on like law school and how like the average I think like cost for you to attend law school all in is like 80 grand, 90 grand, right? And a lot of those are funded by loans, right? So the median salary for a lawyer, last time I checked, was like 70 grand, right? And that's like barely above the average salary across everybody in the country, right? I think the average like salary is like 60-ish grand. So you're going to college to a postgraduate degree, pulling out probably around 80 grand in debt, and then you also only get paid 70 grand at the 50th percentile, and you got to like climb your way out of that hole in the ground, that debt, while maybe you'll make more money, but the odds are kind of stacked against you too. There's a huge conversation to have around like what people pursue and then how they go about leveraging all of that. And this is kind
Yes.
of like by far like the biggest thing I discovered when I started this whole Instagram thing. And I don't even have that many followers, or like I'm not even at 500 yet. But the the posts that get the most engagement are when I talk about raising your income. And people seem very interested when I talk about how me personally, how I got my job when I graduated college. And I graduated and I had like no internships, no resume or anything. And I was like, holy shit, like I got nothing. Nobody wants to hire me, nobody's giving me an interview. Like, did I just go to college for nothing? And that's when I discovered like there's a thing, like a system that you kind of have to like follow in order to get the interview, and then a system for the interview that then gets you the job. And so
Yes.
these things are really interesting because I almost feel like they should be taught in school, but I didn't hear about it until after I graduated.
No. And yes, I it wasn't taught in school. A lot of things weren't taught in school, that and specifically about finances, like doing our taxes, reporting assets on our taxes, uh, how to
Budgeting,
what budgeting, how to start a business, uh, just these types of things. The job market also. It's like, how do you start? What do you need? What should it's not well taught in school. I think, I feel school is a little outdated, especially some of the curriculums in like undergrad. I don't know how you felt, but I felt like some of my courses were 20 years behind. And, when the internet's got the most up-to-date things, these courses don't necessarily represent that. So it's kind of weird that people are coming out of school, previously, like, you come out of school, you're going to be getting a good job that's going to be able to pay your debt off immediately. It's not going to struggle. I struggled to get my first job. It took 7 or 8 months. I tutored, because that's still good money. But if I wanted a 9 to 5 desk job, that would have had to have been underemployed by my standards. So it it's not simple or intuitive. Like you said, I was kind of in the same spot where I had one internship, but writing a resume, that's a skill that you have to learn. You have to go to someone who knows how to write, and they teach you how to write it. And then you're just like, oh, okay, I kind of get what the recruiter wants to see. But it's, these things are challenging. And if I think, like you said, now that you have an Instagram page and you post things, you get a lot of feedback for your material. And I think that's invaluable, because if we just keep quiet about our opinions or how we think about, finances, then we might be making huge mistakes for years on end. So it's better to, say our opinions, say how we think, and then, say it's a really bad idea and not the smartest way to go about it, then be told really quickly that's a bad idea. You should do it this way because you're gonna, that's high risk. You might lose a lot of money. It's not, you know, a high guarantee of a good ROI or anything of that sort. So I think just communicating about it constantly and what we think is, really helpful to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think the thing is the reason, like the big reason that I think there's an obligation actually to do so, to put your ideas out there on forums like this is because I think social media has like gone to a point where it really shapes culture too. Like it shapes what we think is good versus bad, cool versus uncool in a lot of ways. And so much of it is kind of like I think it appeal like there's some sort of mob mentality, like everybody's on one side or another, whatever. People divide into factions, but I when I post my stuff, like I'm thinking of somebody like one of the millionaires. I'm thinking as if I were one of the millionaires from the book The Millionaire Next Door, telling somebody what they should do. Whereas a lot of people, whatever they might post, maybe they're acting like, or at least they're at least embodying it, like they're Kanye West or like they're a Drake in like a mansion with, or the Versace mansion with like a really hot girl or something, right? Like some they're embodying something, right? And then unfortunately, like so much of this gets a lot of attention,
Yes.
and it gets all the I understand why, right? There's some sort of primal thing happening there, I think, where that's why we look to these people and look up to them in some way, and a lot of people idolize them even. But I think like there's a huge power in putting out your own message in an effort to at least attempt to counter it, because somebody who's stumbling through everything might find you, and they might find like whatever you're honestly putting out there to be totally invaluable, like you said, and totally life changing, right? Like for me, somebody who profoundly changed my life was, I don't know if you've heard of him. A few years ago, he got big. His name is Jordan Peterson, the psychologist.
Yes.
Dude, that guy like completely changed my life a few years ago when I was going through a really, really rough patch where I was on my own. I had no money, and there was this deep lack of meaning in my personal life. And then here's this random dude who gets into like the scene because of this, crazy controversy, right? And he just starts putting out his own messages, and he's like, this is what I believe in. And you hear him, and then something about it kind of clicks with you. That's really the power in a lot of these conversations and discussions, right?
Yes. It's it's really powerful. I mean, it's kind of crazy because it's virtual, but it's for someone who's digested a lot of this stuff, and it seems like you've digested it too. I mean, I know my good friends love Jordan Peterson and the message he's put out, and it's helped them immensely as well. Whether that be Joe Rogan, or I have another podcaster, Russ Roberts, Econ Talk. I don't know if you've heard of that podcast, but it's these types of influences and role models which we had no access to before. Like 20 years ago, there's no way you or I are hearing about Jordan Peterson or reading his book, The 12 Steps. And we, it seems like you've taken advantage of it. I feel like I've taken advantage of it. And really, I mean, what if Jordan Peterson, you know, was didn't, because what he posted out there was, especially the controversy and the things afterwards, that takes, some courage, because people don't want you to speak. Right when the controversy happened, he was disliked, and then he kept on speaking, and people weren't very happy about it. But he kept the, he was very courageous. it's been invaluable to so many young men who don't have another influence in our lives. Like, we can go to the internet now instead of just, who knows what we would have done before.
Yeah, no, I joke around when I post on Instagram sometimes. Like I'll reshare something he posted, and I'm like, thanks, Dad, because I literally look at him like he's some sort of like father figure in a lot of ways. Because I grew up personally without a father, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels that way. But it really speaks to like this one quote that I love. The quote goes, the truth doesn't need to be defended. The truth is like a lion; it does not need to be defended. It'll fight for itself." And it's so great because it means, like whatever happens, like whatever somebody says or believes, there will be some at some point in the future where what is best and true comes out on top of it all. And when we talk about like social media and the messages we put out, and how some messages get more attention than others, um, overcoming that gap is really, I think, the challenge. I think there's definitely something that needs to be done in order to promote, because some messages are definitely better than others. I feel like there's a lot of
Yes.
negative messages that people recirculate and focus their attention on, and
Yes.
I think there's a lot of potential to turn things around, and there's a lot of attempts being made, and I think there's a lot of progress too.
I think so too. A lot of people like to highlight or, really zoom in on the worst of the worst. Like, then there's some pretty bad stuff going on social media, people being aggressive, people posting or saying, mean-hearted things. Uh pretty even in the public sphere that happens all the time. And like you said, some messages are better than others, and it's not always easy to gravitate towards the least, you know, I don't want to say aggressive, but least, you know, out of alignment with the truth, maybe is what we could say. It it can be something that, you know, is just not helpful to us, but we just continue to go at it, continue to implement this non-helpful way of thinking because it's continually around us, and everyone around us is, you know, thinking in this sort of way, but we know it's not correct. It's not conducive to a, you know, high quality life. And it takes courage to stand up and say, or to walk away, or to stand up and say no. And I think it's getting better too. It's getting slightly, it's getting better and worse simultaneously,
I think
but
so too. Yeah,
I don't think it's just getting worse. I think a lot of things are getting better, and it's just hard to see in the noise of, you know, just we like to, the news likes to highlight negative things more so than positive things, and that kind of just, and so do we as human beings, I believe it's a survival mechanism, as I've heard from or read. And I think we just can, like Jordan Peterson, it's a view. You can take your view, and it can it's just that little mindset that clicks, that, instead of just seeing all the junk around you and not being able to do anything about it because it seems so overwhelming, just do the small things and the small wins, and then those will accumulate, and eventually we can, look back onto this huge progression. And that can be personal, just like personal growth and our maturation, or that could be financial too, where, we have this huge burden of, maybe I want a home in 2 years, maybe I want to get out of my student debt within 4 years. And it seems like no way. but it's the small things that, you know, small decisions day in, day out. Are you gonna go and out on Saturday night and go to a really expensive club, get a bunch of drinks with a bunch of friends, or are you gonna go maybe to like a park or the beach? You're in Florida, so we can just go to the beach and just chill. It's and those accumulate over time.
Yeah, one big thing I read somewhere was that like some of the habits you have that like you're not that they get locked in that you can't build new habits, but a lot of your habits they say start to solidify when you're like in your mid 20s. And they say that like the habits that you keep there that are the most persistent are the ones that are going to stick with you even out like decades, right? I don't know how true it is, but it's just something I read somewhere, and I definitely find it to be the case when it comes to anything relating to money. Like I think so many people like another thing I read somewhere was that half of so here's I should probably preface this. So Gen Z, the cutoff for the age, right, is I believe 9 years old to 24 years old, right? So many of them, like the big trend that we're like seeing is that more of them are living with their parents, being supported financially by their parents. Their parents are paying their housing costs. They're taking longer to leave, right? Like all these like big trends. And what I believe is happening is America in general, our society has like a spending problem, like on average, right? Like people just with whether it's with credit cards or typically credit cards, that's actually a big one. People will just overspend and then shackle themselves to the interest and really they'll never really have anything left over, right? So all of this kind of ties back to the idea of personal, in my opinion, personal responsibility, personal awareness and discipline. And I think they're just so interlinked. Like a connection I make a lot is the relationship between fitness and finance, right? Like personal finance. Like if you want to like if you know you eat too much, you're gonna get fat. Like it's kind of that simple, right? If you spend too much money, and you kind of also have a feeling too when you spend too much money, like you like to
Yes.
splurge and celebrate with your friends, and then you get home and you're like, crap, like I probably shouldn't have done what I just did, and then you get guilty or buyer's remorse, right? There's all these examples. In any case, I feel like this huge problem exists and people know about it, but everybody's kind of like in this hive mentality where they kind of just ignore it and they move on and they live their day to day and nothing really changes.
No. No, I agree with you too. It's a huge problem. We kind of think that money grows on trees. And although I do believe, there's ability for, wealth isn't finite. I think that we can make wealth infinite, especially if you look at what we've done it with the digital world. But at the same time, living dramatically out of our means at any point is going to bankrupt us. And do you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say the it kind of when you live beyond your means, and then this gets into a big debate where people say, well, I deserve to treat myself, or I deserve, or food shouldn't be so expensive, right? Like there's some reality to that too, for example. But the point is that when you don't have enough money, it does not matter like what you believe should be the case. Like you're gonna hit zero and nobody's gonna save you. Or at least that's how it was with me, right? Like or hopefully like maybe your mom or your dad or somebody's looking out for you, but for a lot of people, like they don't have anything to really lean on. And the craziest part is that so much of the problem is self-inflicted. So, like, imagine how much better the world would be if people, if everybody had the Mint app, for example, and they just used it, right? If they just opened it up and saw like what it had to say about their spending last month, and saw like a big picture view of where their like life's heading financially, maybe that alone like could be of major benefit, but yet people don't do
I think it could be a huge benefit. I mean, I know me personally, when I go on there and I see red, it
it.
sucks. Like, I'm just like, damn, like that is not where I wanted to be. And then you see the number and you see what you had and how much over it you're spending. And it's like, at least like, and your expenditures, and I know my expenditures, but it's when we have no clue that crazy things can happen. And you're just like, how did and you're not looking at the numbers at any point, so you just like don't see this, like these expenditures like coming in by the day or by the week. And you know if we don't measure it, we won't see it, and if we don't see it, we're not going to do anything about it until we see it, usually when it's way too late.
Yeah, and I've never understood why you wouldn't. Actually, I can kind of theorize why. I imagine that part of it's fear.
Yes.
Part of it's like an unwillingness to like look yourself in the mirror and recognize that you're doing something wrong when it comes to your money, right?
Yes.
But now what do you do about that? You know what I mean? Because if you're not willing, who's gonna tell you?
That it's probably, the banks eventually are going to have to be the ones that say, yeah, I know a friend who's kind of has trouble getting a credit card and has to, several banks aren't going to work with him anymore. So he has to go to a specific bank to get a credit card, and he's still in his 20s. So, I
Very
mean,
common.
v- it's and like you're saying, Gen Z currently has an issue, or currently is relying on their parents for housing, for supplemental costs, and are taking longer time to leave the house and develop their own financial freedom. Their parents need to retire soon, and
That's
that's
another
good.
problem, yeah.
That's another that's a huge problem. I mean, the boomers are a very large portion of our population, and they're getting up there, and they're a huge portion of the workforce too. Like, I don't know how your workforce is, but there's a lot of people over the age of 55, and they're going to need to retire. And are they going to be able to support their children through that? And just to continue on that, like, say you graduate college and you don't work for 2-3 years, you look much worse to an employer at 25. I graduated in 2018, but I haven't had a job in the last 3 years. That looks terrible. So it's really like in our own interest to really take financial freedom on as soon as possible.
Something else that really scared me when I read it was I work in corporate strategy, like you said earlier. And the coolest part about that job is that you're thinking about like the big, big macro picture for like the country, the world, big, big technologies and like their impacts, right? And so we look at like different segments of consumers, different populations of people, Gen Z being one of them. We look at typically generationally too. So for Gen Z, like one of the thing that like is like just imprinted in my brain is that we are described as tending to have a desire to escape reality. And that's like crazy to me because you have all these technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality that are going to like be a big thing in the next few, like 5 to 10 years, right? Where companies are going to start using them. But companies are already using them, where you walk into a store and you can look into a mirror, and like some AR will like put some glasses on you, and it'll look like you're wearing the glasses that you can order custom made or something like that. And all these, anyway, but the thing is, the implications of that is like if my generation is described to like have this desire to escape reality, like what does that also imply to their real life's habits? You know what I mean? Like if you got screen time going up, the time spent on your phone going up, what about the time spent like looking inside, like personally, with regards to your surroundings, your physical life, your physical future, not like Fortnite and OnlyFans and these all these other things that are just kind of like an escape from reality. That's a huge, like, something that kind of keeps me up when I think about it.
It's scary. It's and it's only gonna get better, like you alluded to, and I know video games are a huge sport right now. Esports are killing it, and
Yeah.
so it's you know, I think it's education at the end of the day. I think, schools, whoever, parents especially, need to teach kids the dangers of these tools. Like, they can be incredible. Instagram can be incredible. You and I would have never have met if it wasn't for Instagram, but Instagram can also be toxic, and it's really, like, up to us to understand which of these tools are useful, which are not useful, and how we can or not get consumed by them completely. But going to your point, like you said earlier, some people aren't thinking like that at all. And so if they're not thinking like that, what can we do? And it is scary. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually therein lies. I think there could actually be some sort of opportunity there, actually. Like when I think about, like, you have, well, I don't know, because you have all these people who aren't, there's this spending problem. Social Security is going to run out by like 2023, or not, 2033 is I think what I heard somewhere. Um, all these different like personal like problems that could be solved at the personal level. And then you have this aging population over here who are going to have their own money problems. But then you have this new generation of people who have all these characteristics of not, preferring to escape reality is one of them. Um, de- I would say dependent on technology, right? Phone in your hand at all times. Um, and like they also described it, like this generation as having like a little bit less of a sense of personal meaning, right? Which I thought was really interesting to read once. So when I like blend these things together and I think about like what that means for every individual's personal finances, I struggle to like I think there has to be something that either snaps and then causes people to value it, which is one possibility with like the student loan debt bubble, right? Which is really interesting when, talking about COVID and the forbearance and all that. That's interesting too, because you have all these people who haven't paid a dime to their student loans because they didn't have to. And it's like that's an example of a way in which you could have taken care of something and you didn't take advantage of it, and now it's going to come back, and you still got to. The problem never went away. You know what I mean? Like it's an
Yes.
example, a perfect example of ignoring your reality, right? I don't
Yes.
know. I think it has to snap.
I it seems like that, like something like 2008, where it just, you know, kind of really quickly things turn. I felt like that too for a long time. Like, how is it that we can spend this much How is it that this ball keeps rolling, you know, whether it be student debt or m medical, what's going on in medicine and the price of medicine and just the outrageous costs of living in America, it's gotta snap. Eh,
Hmm.
do you have something?
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say that I the student loan debt problem is really interesting, right? Because it's kind of it's actually pretty similar to 2008 in a lot of ways because you have these loans that are just getting securitized, right? And so everybody's just kind of repackaging them. And there's a private student loan debt market too, which is huge, right? It's booming. But then you have the, I believe it's the problem with education in general, where the costs of it, like its increases, are far outpacing inflation, all kinds of other categories, right? You know, I think the other thing there is the fact that these student loans, the public student loans, are backed by the federal government. So that's another big problem, right? Because that incentivizes the universities to continue to raise their prices so long as the federal
Yes.
government backs it. Um, I that actually is a really interesting topic because that it's also similar to when COVID happened and the stock market or not crashed, but dropped. The Federal Reserve stepped in and started, injecting money into the system and pushing everything up. These things are big picture items and they have broad consequences, right? So I don't think we've seen that yet either.
No, I don't think so either. Uh, it's kinda scary to see what's gonna happen. I mean, I know people have been talking about Evergrande defaulting on I think maybe its dividend payments to its stock owners and that causing a huge ripple effect because I know that in the real estate market here, there are a lot of Chinese nationals that are purchasing homes. So if there's, if they're having problems over there and then loans are being defaulted over here, that can be a huge issue. So I can see, it's got to snap in some way because there's a lot of inflation, whether that be, I think stock prices right now are
Yep.
crazy inflated. The and everything else too. I mean, it it's not that simple though to pinpoint to anything. And I've thought that I thought COVID was definitely going to cause a crash. Do you believe that because of the actions of the Federal Reserve that was delayed, or how do you think COVID has played out with the economy?
Well, that's actually a really great way to put it because something like something that I hear parroted a lot online, especially, is people saying the stock market is not the economy. And there's some truth to that, right? Because the economy is composed of all the people who, you got your smaller businesses too. You got all the people who are not publicly traded companies. You got all the private companies that are not in the stock market. COVID obviously had a huge impact on everything. That's can't even be argued. But what the Federal Reserve did doesn't really benefit the people who are not in the stock market, right? Like if anything, the money that they like for I believe they had this program where they were buying billions of dollars of corporate debt, right? So they were giving cash to corporations directly in order to, buying their debt, pushing that out into the future, giving the corporations this cash in the short term to survive when the pandemic was at its low point, right, at its worst. So there are real implications there that might benefit the economy in the short term, But long term, the problem now is that if you got too much cash in the system, it's got to deflate at some point, right? And so there's got to be some sort of counter effect to, inflation's already like they're talking about all the time right now, continues to outpace any rate it's been at for like a decade, right? At least I think the solution to that personally is controlling the money supply, getting that out of the system, and then forcing it prices down that way. But what that means then is stock prices will take a hit in the short term. But when I talk about the stock market with people, and they hear that, they get afraid of the short term because they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't put money in. But it depends on what you're talking about, because if you're talking about just investing in the stock market at broad scale, like you should be in that 24/7. That's just a long-term thing.
Yes. A lot of people don't see it like that. They see it as being a day trader, and if I purchase it now when it's down, how am I going to make money in a month or 2 months?
I had a friend who, and I made this mistake too. So last April, when the market dropped, I was like, I said to my friend, because I was taking I was still in school for my master's degree in finance, right? And I was learning about options. I don't know if you've heard of options, right? But basically,
Yes.
yeah, it's a magnify. It basically leverages the effect of buying one share, right, times 100, literally. So the supply and demand affects the price, yada yada, right? So I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna bet the market's gonna like just crash. And so I put a lot of short term cash that I had that I should have just put into my student loans into bets that the market was gonna continue to decline. And then the Fed steps in, and then they're like, we're gonna start buying hundreds of billions of dollars of corporate debt by the day, starting now, in order to combat, basically for the stock market, right? And the market would just keep going up after it bounced from its low. And I'm like, what is going on? Like it should be going down. And I ended up losing like $8,000 off of
Wow.
those stupid bets alone, because I was greedy. I was trying to make money off of a short-term market event. And the reality is that's what like day traders do. Like they try to make really quick money, and most of them get burned. And you got all these people saying they know how to beat it and whatever, but it's all just like a smoke screen.
A lot of it feels like a smokescreen, or people. Crypto right now seems like a huge smokescreen.
Oh my God, yeah. I see. I respect crypto because there's a lot about it that I don't understand. But at least when I talk about stocks, like, and I think about all of the structure that goes into what it means to own a stock and how it's a piece of a company, crypto does not give me that same
No,
that same sense of assurance that like this is representative of something that is attached to something tangible that will create, that has the opportunity to create value. You know what I mean? Like I actually don't own any crypto, and a lot of people look at me and they're like, "Are you crazy?" And I'm like, "Look, I don't. I'm not gonna. I'm listening to Warren Buffett when he says, don't, or no, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Like I honestly,
speculation.
yeah, I'm not trying to speculate. I do have to learn a lot more about crypto though. Unfortunately, I don't know that much.
Me neither. And like you said, I think it's just smarter to not go in it, because I know a lot of people talk about making money on crypto, but there are also some people that lose a bit of money, and it's not as enjoyable to say that out loud as saying, "Oh, I made
Yeah.
$200,000 off NFTs."
Dude, don't even get me started with NFTs, man. I have a friend who is obsessed with them. He will not stop talking about them. And I just keep getting blown away whenever I hear about all the money that comes out of some of those transactions.
Is he making a lot of money on NFTs?
Him personally, not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what needs to be said about that, right? Survivorship bias. I don't know. I don't know like where the future goes there specifically. I have a lot of reading to do, but But man, like some of these kids are making bank off of JPEGs. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy.
Yes. Yes. But again, it's a JPEG. It's not, it's like
Yeah.
not whoever's purchasing that, nice, but it's not Tesla stock. It's not stock in an S&P 500 company. It's not something that has been proven to generate wealth in any way other than, or NFTs do, but it's that's like a whole business, I think, to put that to side. But investing in crypto, that's, like you said, it doesn't do it for you. It doesn't do it for me either, because why should I invest in a currency? Why should I invest in a currency? I don't think that makes much sense to, you know, especially if we're already late to the game. So then other people are, I mean, maybe we won't even have a choice, because it seems like it's going that way, where it's like there's no choice here. This currency is going to be here and it's going to be of a certain value. But right now, it's just, it's hard for me to invest in just currency alone.
And I have a lot of friends who really believe in crypto, and I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe because it's there's something technological, innovative about it, and because of that, there's this incredible attraction to it versus just going into like Apple stock, right? Like, which is Apple stock on its own. It's like crazy returns if you look at it like over
Yes.
the decades, right? But
And a
but it's
great
not like this
price
cool
earnings.
new thing. Yeah, exactly. And it's not, but it doesn't have this like, oh, this new novel feeling, I guess, that NFTs have and that crypto has. And there's a lot of, I found there was another company I heard of. I forgot what their name was, but they were in the business of securitizing physical assets that were of value, right? Like collectible items. So like this old wine that's like hundreds of years old, it's worth 20 grand or something. I don't know, but I'm making that up. It's worth some crazy number, and actually decided to make that number, broke it down into like shares for you to buy and hold on to as an investment. It's to me like that's actually just another business model where you got people securitizing stuff that they believe are assets and then getting people to buy in, and not that it's a pyramid scheme, but like this is kind of where it gets iffy on like what it is, where are you going to put your money, and what is your rationale for doing so. And the truth is that there's a lot of bad places to put it. Like I don't necessarily want to make my statement that crypto is that, because I feel like I don't know about enough about it. So far, what I do know is that it's a currency, like you said, and that in and of itself isn't very attractive, right?
No.
But when I like me buying a piece of it, like a share of like I don't know, let's just say 1/100th of this expensive bottle of wine or some Van Gogh art piece, like maybe. I don't know. I to me, like I continue to stick to like, look, here's this stock market. It's been around for over a century, and it's got these incredible returns based on companies that actually exist, who have employees and operations and products and services. Like, let's just start with what we know, and then maybe if you want to like put like 1% of your investable money somewhere crazy, like a bottle of wine, a share of a bottle of wine, maybe then, you know what I mean? But so many people get hooked on these. I honestly, like, to me, they're like get rich quick schemes, right? Like in their own little way. So it's unfortunate that like so many people seem to just go all in on it, and then they lose their shirt. Like let's say they buy Bitcoin when it was, I forgot what the top was, but then it came
60.
crashing down. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
60 or something. I don't even know where it's at now, but then they like bounce back down, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, get out!" Like, you got these people who don't really even believe enough to hold like what it is they're bought into too, which says a
Yes.
lot.
Yes, it does. That's a great point actually, because if you believe in Bitcoin, you should just be buying as much as possible, never considering selling. I've heard that there are a couple companies that all they do is purchase Bitcoin, and they're like have outrageous amounts of Bitcoin. So their value, stock value, or their, you know, I don't know what type of value it is, but their asset value is through the roof.
That's interesting. Yeah, I heard some company is buying Bitcoin. I don't think it wasn't Tesla. It was some big company that like was buying at least some amount of some crypto. I believe it was just Bitcoin. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were companies that were created for the sole purpose of buying Bitcoin, which would be interesting too, because that's actually like a you got your Bitcoin and then you got your stock price and now you're like connecting them, right? So that's something I haven't looked into, but there's a lot of like shady to me that's kind of shady. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna
Yes.
you won't see me buying a lot of stock in that company.
No.
So there's all these great options out like and all, like you were talking about earlier, like prices are definitely inflated right now. But like if you hold it and you believe in what you're buying and you have the strong conviction in it, like Apple's not going away in the next 5 years or something. They're not going
No.
away anytime soon, right? They're
No.
too above the clouds. So me to buy Apple right now, like you're right. Like I might take like a 20% hit if things crash, um, and it might be slow to come back or whatever. But it's way better than putting your money in these other places where it might just go to nothing, and
Yes,
and that's like very possible too.
it is. I agree. I think, you know, if you're not, and you've already said it, like the way you've been talking about crypto, you don't know enough about it to invest in it, and you follow Warren Buffett, who says if you don't understand something, don't invest in it, don't speculate. And I don't. You, my investments are mostly defensive. Just S&P 500, slowly and surely, because I can't, I don't know enough about companies and stocks, and maybe I could invest in Apple and Tesla. I don't know if I would invest in Tesla just because it's super
Well, Tesla,
saturated.
yeah,
But
Tesla's crazy.
yes. And do you have something? What's the reason you say they're crazy?
Well, I mean, Tesla's people have this incredible debate about Tesla, but when you and this is really where investing gets interesting, right? Because now you're talking about the hardcore traditional finance, the methods of valuing stuff, right? So Tesla, people go back and forth all day long because you have your traditional finance folks, which is like what I learned in my program at school and super valuable information to me personally, where if you compare it to other companies or if you take certain metrics of based on the stock price and their earnings and stuff like that, like you'll see that it's this crazy high number that maybe doesn't make sense. That's like one side of it. But then the other side is like, hold on, you're not considering all of the optionality that Tesla has because Tesla is this company that's not just selling cars, they're also making batteries, they're also trying to do the solar thing. They're going to be at the forefront of electric car adoption, which is expected to continue to grow in the future. All these different things that aren't as tangible as a line item on their income statement to pin to a number and say it's worth this much, right? So there's tons of debate there, you know what I mean? And another great example actually that I don't know if you've heard of is with a lady who started an investment company a couple years back called ARK Funds. Have you heard of them?
No.
Her whole theme is she wants to invest in disruptive, innovative companies, and so her flagship ETF investment has Tesla as like 10% of the portfolio, right? So there's other companies in there too, and they're doing all kinds of interesting, innovative things. But the thing that she says about them is that these companies have incredibly high levels of what we call optionality, and all that means is the technology that they're using to run their business and to what they're doing with it has all of these potential avenues that they can take to do other things too. So like with Elon and with Tesla, it's like you got the electric car, but then you have the battery, and then you have the network of charging stations throughout the country and all these other things, right? And then you have autonomous Teslas. That's called optionality, and so she has this belief, this investing belief about how these companies, they're very underpriced when you think about what, the all these alternate paths of growth that they have yet to unlock, and they're actually worth way more. And she actually had this bet she made years ago on TV that Tesla was going to go to some crazy price, and everybody called her crazy, and then Tesla, and then it happened, right? But that's a different story. But there's different camps and there's different ways to do it, but I think my personal view is that everybody should just have a thesis for why they own something, whether it's based on numbers or whether it's based on these other things. Like I don't necessarily think one's better than the other, um, but you should have that if you're going to put money into an individual company. You know what I mean?
Yes. And you should be well educated and confident in your decisions, which that woman, what's her name?
Oh, sorry, I never even said her name. Her name is Kathy or Kathy Wood. Yeah,
Kathy Wood and her company,
ARK Investment Funds.
ARK Investment Funds. She seems confident in her approach.
Yeah, yeah. If you Google the video later, you can just put in Kathy Wood, Tesla. I think it was like CNBC. It's like years ago, and she's like, "Yeah, Tesla was like at a couple $100s," and she was like, "Yeah, it's gonna be like 3,000." And everybody's like, "You're crazy." And then here we are. It's split and whatever, but when you adjust it for that, it's like I believe it's like over 4,000 or something like that. So
Wow. That, I mean, some people, yeah, because I've looked at Tesla for a few years and I've noticed the balance sheets are pretty bad. But, people love Elon Musk. They love the Tesla car. And I think those two things, just and the way Elon Musk goes about like his Twitter profile and his whole, the way he talks and, goes on Joe Rogan, I think that's part of the investment right there too. It's like more than just this company Tesla. It's also Elon Musk the person.
yeah, and that segue is great into behavioral finance, right? And all of these other intangible things about the hype behind a company that we see a lot in today's world, where you have these VC, these venture capital investors dumping money at some initiative, like some different companies that like blow their socks off and make them so excited, even though they might be totally in the red and not making any money or even any sales. And they'll go and say, take my money because this is a valuable investment. Like there's a lot to be said about that too, right? That's pitching an investment, right? So there's a lot of quality companies out there that aren't nearly as sexy, and they're great things to hold on to. But then you have this other side where you have these really, they make a statement, and they show and they stand out, and of course, like the more attention gets put on a company, that's actually a factor, I would argue, and its price too, right? It would be worth a
Yes.
lot more if everybody knew about it versus nobody. So it's not necessarily pinned to the value of the company, which is unfortunate, but I think that is true. I think in the long term though, when things really pan out, I think there's some sort of reversion to wherever the truth lies and everything.
In what way?
Like I would say, like if Elon is the dude keeping Tesla's price where it's at because he's Elon, and one day he decides to quit Tesla, like and maybe he wants to, or maybe he dies out of nowhere, right? Like God protect Elon, because I would never want that to happen to him. He's such a badass. But if that were to happen, like, and then the next person steps in to run Tesla, I think there'd be a lot of confidence lost in Tesla, and I think that just like that, you could have like a 20% drop. You know what I mean? Like it could be that easy. So
Yes. That's that's a good reason to not invest. I mean, that's a probably like I that's a good point because even through all of this, one might argue Tesla's doing great. Tesla's making a lot of money. How many more Tesla cars do you see on the streets? And then, you make the argument, well, would you still invest in Tesla if Elon Musk wasn't the CEO?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, no, I wouldn't. S- So I it's a fine line, and I think, now we're definitely too late to get good value on Tesla stock, even if it does go. I mean, it could be an Apple, but
Dude, we
App
could be so wrong, right? You know what I mean? Like I'm okay with being wrong, but
yes,
at some point along the way, like there's got to be some sort of snap because of something going a certain way. You know what I mean? Like there will be some justification for wherever it's at, in my opinion. Like it'll happen. Like Amazon's another good example because I think I forgot what year they started. It was like 99 or something, right before the dot-com bubble burst. And people thought they were a bookstore. And Bezos, he had this grandiose vision and people didn't really see it at the time. And then before you knew it, like things started happening and then all of a sudden, like he's the richest guy in the world, right? So we could be wrong. Like if you fast forward 10 years and Elon is somehow still running things the way that he has been, right? Um, who knows like what could have been accomplished by then, right? There might be serious justification for whatever the price is at then. It's interesting stuff, right? Because now we're talking about the future.
yes. It's hard to yeah, it's hard to be confident unless you're well educated and up to date and really reading things. It's it's very difficult to be confident.
Yeah, totally. And that's part of the reason why I love like Warren's approach because when I would read books about him or his professor Benjamin Graham, he talks about it as like he goes to a company, he talks to the management, he looks at their financials, he looks at how the company is being run today, right? And he just says, look, this company might continue to grow, but as it stands today, it's like a quality company with a great team, very few competitors. They have a quality, let's call it moat, they call it, right? Infrastructure protecting them from competitors. Those are all like trademark characteristics of like a quality long-term investment. He's not thinking about the future optionality nearly as much as people pin their thesis to today when they talk about stuff like ARC or like Tesla. And that's something to consider too, I think, because it's true that this stuff can be revolutionary, but I think the execution is even more important than the idea. So that's something that's, I would argue, hard to get right. So there's a high risk there too.
There is a high risk there. And execution is huge because companies can die out pretty easily if they don't have the right processes in place and pretty much aren't able to put their employees in good positions to succeed.
Oh my God, there's tons of ways a company can die, and it's amazing that companies can even survive for as long as they do. You know what I mean? Like there's just the market, right? There's the people buying their products and the way they change. There's the competitors coming in to steal your customers, and then there's your internal management of all your employees, and then you have to make sure you keep them because if they just keep leaving, then the company's not going to have any way to run, right? So tons of ways a company could die, right? So
Yes.
like I love reading about how like this old school method of going to the company's headquarters and talking to the I mean obviously not as realistic today perhaps, but it still speaks to the necessity of doing your diligence, right, before you commit to it.
Yes. And Most people don't. Most people just invest in whatever, used to be stock their friends were into, and now it's whatever crypto their friends are into. Di
Yeah, and
No,
sorry, you were
go.
gonna say?
No, continue.
No, I was just gonna say that like I don't even know what the solution is to that. I think that's something that's just kind of always gonna exist, you know?
Yeah. It's, b behavioral finance,
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's right.
and we're all, reactionary, so I think the best way to, not be too reactionary is just education, education, education.
Yeah, and I think there's tremendous value in like I think we all have kind of like a job to use whatever education we have, right? Like you said you worked in engineering, right? You probably know a ton of stuff that I don't. Like there's tons of value in just putting forth whatever it is that you know pretty well and then getting these ideas together, you know what I mean? Because that's how people like we learn through talking, I find. We think through talking too. So
Absolutely. That's a great place to end it, I think. Do you, Matt, have any last words you'd like to tell everyone?
no, yeah, I just want to say thank you, Karosh, for having me on. It was awesome getting to talk to you. Really cool to just have this conversation. Like these are the kind of quality conversations that I think more of us need to have.
You're welcome, Matt. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.